Welcome to a place far removed from the familiar hum of the world. Tonight, you will walk down a path that few return from. Not because it is dangerous, but because once you've entered, you may not want to leave. What you are about to hear is a gentle descent into a quiet horror, soft enough to sleep to, dark enough to make your dreams just a little unsettled. So take a breath. Release the weight of the day. Because the night is long, and the house you're about to visit has been waiting for a very, very long time. This is the story of a long, peculiar night. A night when a traveler wandered far from the comforts of roads and towns and stepped into a quiet horror that would mark them forever. The events took place long ago, though the house still stands if one knows where to look. And sometimes, on windless nights, the pines still whisper the name of the traveler who walked too far into the darkness. The traveler entered the forest just before dusk, following a narrow path that cut deep into ancient pines. The trees towered overhead, their branches weaving together to shut out the sky. No birds sang, no insects hummed. The silence was so complete that the traveler could hear their own heartbeat echoing in their ears. The deeper they walked, the stranger the forest became. A faint mist curled around their steps, sliding across the ground like something alive. The air grew colder, thinner, as though the forest was quietly inhaling each breath the traveler released. Still, they continued on. They didn't know why. They only felt that they were being drawn forward by something unseen, something patient, something that had been waiting a very long time. At last, through the shroud of trees and fog, the traveler saw it, a house, tall, crooked, a silhouette of leaning beams and sagging wood, outlined by the pallid glow of a moon that hadn't been in the sky moments before. The traveler approached the house cautiously. Its windows were dark except for one on the second floor, a faint amber flicker, like the last ember of a dying fire. It wasn't warm or welcoming. It felt more like an eye watching them approach. The porch groaned as the traveler stepped onto it. Not the usual creak of tired wood. A softer, lower sound, almost a sigh, as if the house was exhaling in relief. When the traveler touched the door, the wood was strangely warm, alive almost. They meant to knock but didn't have the chance. The door opened on its own, slowly, soundlessly, as though the house had been expecting them. Inside, the house smelled of dust, weathered wood, and something faintly metallic like rain striking old iron. Candles burned along the walls, their flames perfectly still, unmoving despite the draft that should have been there. Portraits lined the hallway, their faces faded into pale smudges, yet their eyes, even blurred, seemed to follow the traveler's movement. At the end of the foyer stood a staircase that wound upward into thick, unnatural darkness. And beneath that darkness, from somewhere above, came the steady, deliberate sound of footsteps, slow, measured, pacing, as if someone on the upper floor had been walking back and forth for a very long time. The traveler ascended the stairs, every step sounding far louder than it should. At the top, a long hallway stretched forward, its wooden boards warped, like the spine of some ancient creature. Every door was closed except the one at the very end. A sliver of warm light glowed beneath it, not welcoming, just waiting. The traveler pushed it open. Inside was a small bedroom, strangely well preserved. A narrow bed, a writing desk cluttered with papers, a single candle burning beside them, and above the bed, a portrait of a child. The traveler froze. The child's face was unmistakable, the same eyes, the same quiet expression, even the same small scar at the edge of the lip, a scar the traveler themselves bore and had never known the origin of. The painted child stared outward, not smiling, not frowning, expectant, as though the traveler was late for a long-awaited return. Drawn to the desk, the traveler examined the papers. Most were covered in notes written in a dark, heavy ink, the lines jagged and frantic. One page lay neatly on top. The handwriting was clearer, more familiar. It read, If you are reading this, you have come back. The traveler didn't understand. But before they could read further, a faint sound rose from beneath the floorboards. A whisper, low, soft, almost pleading. The traveler knelt, pressing an ear to the wooden planks. For a moment, nothing. Then the whisper came again, stronger now, clearer, calling a name, the traveler's name. Not angrily, not urgently, but gently, like a voice long forgotten yet deeply familiar. The boards beneath their hands felt warm, pulsing, alive. And before the traveler could stand, before they could question what exactly was whispering beneath the floor, the door behind them slowly closed on its own. The traveler remained very still as the door latched shut behind them with a dull final click. The whispering beneath the floor faded into a soft murmur, like someone talking in their sleep on the other side of a thin wall. The room itself seemed to settle, the air growing warmer, almost heavy. The traveler turned back to the desk. Among the scattered papers was a small drawer, simple, wooden, with a tarnished metal handle. They tugged it gently, locked, but as their fingers brushed the handle, the whisper beneath the floorboards grew louder. Not words now, just a sound. A long drawn-out sigh, like the exhale of something that had been waiting for a very long time. The traveler stepped back. The floorboards beneath their feet were warmer now, warmer than any wood should be. Whatever was beneath them was awake. Needing to gather their thoughts, the traveler left the room behind. The hallway outside was dimmer than before. The candle flames along the walls burned lower, casting long, trembling shadows that stretched like reaching fingers across the floor. The portraits that lined the hall were less faded now, human shapes taking on clearer form, faces emerging where only smudges had been. The traveler paused beside one of them. It depicted a tall woman with hollow cheeks and a gaze so sharp it seemed to cut through the dim light. Her lips were parted, as though she were whispering something the moment the paint had dried. The traveler leaned closer. The woman's eyes, dull brown, lifeless, shifted. Not a full movement, not a turn, just a flicker. A twitch of recognition. The traveler stumbled back, heart pounding, but the portrait remained still, the painted eyes once again frozen. From the far end of the hallway came a faint creak, like a door slowly opening on rusted hinges, but all the doors were closed. Every one, except the one leading to the staircase descending into the lower floor. The traveler approached the stairwell. A cold draft seeped upward, smelling faintly of earth and something older than rot. The house groaned overhead, the long, slow complaint of ancient beams shifting under invisible weight. Step by step, the traveler descended. The wooden treads felt softer here, as though worn down by countless footsteps that should not have existed. Halfway down the stairs, they paused. Something moved in the darkness below. Not quickly, not aggressively, just enough to make the shadows stir. The traveler waited, listened. Nothing. The silence in the lower floor felt deeper than any silence before. A silence so dense it seemed to swallow the soft rhythm of breathing. Finally, their feet touched the bottom step. A corridor stretched before them, long and narrow, lit only by a single candle burning at the far end. Its flame was nearly motionless, as though the air itself refused to shift around it. The traveler walked slowly, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust carpeting the floor. As they approached the candle, a door beside it came into view. It was different from all the others in the house, heavier, reinforced with iron bands. Scratches marked the lower half-long jagged marks, as though something with claws had fought to get out, or fought desperately to get in. The traveler leaned closer. The scratches were deep, so deep that splinters had been torn clean away. They placed their hand against the cold iron band. For a moment, nothing. Then, from the other side of the door, they felt it, a faint vibration. A slow, steady rhythm. A heartbeat. The traveler pulled their hand back, but the heartbeat continued, thudding gently against the wood and metal. Not fast, not frantic, just waiting. Chapter 10. The Voice in the Walls. The traveler stepped back, breath quickening. At that moment, the candle flame flickered, for the first time since they had arrived. A draft slid through the corridor, cold, sharp, carrying with it a whisper. This one did not come from beneath the floorboards or behind the door. This whisper moved along the walls, sliding through the wooden beams like a thin stream of air passing through hollow bones. The voice was soft. Soft enough to be mistaken for wind, but the house was sealed tight. No wind could move through it. The traveler held still, listening. The whisper grew clearer, more distinct. A faint sentence spoken repeatedly, almost tenderly. "You left, but you came back." Another whisper followed, this one deeper, heavier, layered like several voices speaking at once. "We remember you." The house creaked as though shifting closer. The heartbeat behind the iron door grew louder. And the candle flame, for the first time, leaned toward the traveler as if drawn by an unseen breath. The traveler backed away from the iron-banded door, their pulse matching the heavy thud from the other side. As they retreated, they noticed a door across the corridor, a plain wooden one, unmarked, without scratches or locks. It stood slightly ajar, as if waiting for them and them alone. Despite the growing dread curling in their stomach, the traveler reached for it. The hinges gave no sound as the door swung open into a small room, barely touched by time. Inside was a simple rocking chair, a thin blanket draped over it. The chair moved gently, not the wide arc of a rocking motion, but a soft rhythmic sway, as though someone had just left it a moment before the traveler arrived. On the floor lay a single object, a child's wooden toy block. Its painted letter, though faded, was unmistakable, the first letter of the traveler's name. The rocking chair swayed again, slow, measured, in time with a breath that was no longer present. The traveler stepped back, closing the door quietly before the chair could fall still. Chapter 12. The handprint on the wall. Returning to the corridor, the traveler noticed something they were certain had not been there before. A handprint, pressed into the dust on the wall near the stairs. Small, delicate, the size of a child's hand. The outline was crisp, fresh, as though placed only seconds earlier. The traveler reached toward it, not touching, just observing. The shape was familiar, too familiar, and their breath caught in their throat. Before they could move away, a soft tapping sound echoed from somewhere above. One tap, a pause, then another, and another. A slow, steady pattern, not from footsteps, not from creaking beams. It was as if someone were knocking softly on the walls from the inside. Chapter 13. The return to the foyer, unease growing. The traveler moved quickly toward the staircase, leading back up to the foyer. The house felt different now, warmer, as if it had fully awakened. The once silent walls now seemed to hum with a barely perceptible vibration, like a distant choir murmuring beneath the traveler's feet. As they reached the foyer, the candles lining the walls burned brighter than when they had first entered. Their flames stretched upward, thin and tall, as if pulled by invisible strings. But the most unsettling change was the portraits. They were clearer than ever. The faces were no longer blurred or fading. They were sharp, distinct, lifelike. And their eyes, dozens of them, followed the traveler with unmistakable intention. One portrait in particular caught the traveler's attention. A man with a stern jaw, deep-set eyes, and a faint scar across his cheek. The traveler froze. They recognized the scar. It matched the scar they themselves bore. The portrait's expression seemed almost disappointed, as if the house had expected more from them. Chapter 14. The door to the parlor. To break the stare of the many eyes watching them, the traveler pushed forward into the next room, the parlor. The door creaked open, revealing a space filled with dust and long-forgotten furniture draped in pale sheets. A fireplace sat cold and empty, yet soot stains, fresh as morning ink, ran down the inner bricks. The travelers stepped inside. As they did, The door behind them swung shut with a firm snap. On the floor, stretching out in a line toward the fireplace, was a trail of footprints. Small ones, bare, with faint outlines of dirt and something darker pressed into the fibers of the rug. The footprints stopped right at the hearth, as if the unseen child had stepped into the fireplace itself. The traveler knelt, peering inside. Nothing, only darkness and cold bricks. But the moment they leaned closer, the faintest whisper rose from the chimney, a voice drifting down, soft as falling ash. "Don't leave again." The traveler staggered back, heart pounding. Chapter 15. The mirror that wasn't a mirror turning away from the fireplace. The traveler noticed a tall standing mirror in the corner of the parlor. Its frame was carved with twisting vines and strange, unsettling symbols that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The mirror's surface was fogged, as though someone had breathed across it moments ago. When the traveler wiped it clean, their reflection did not move. They blinked. The reflection did not. They stepped back. The reflection remained still, watching with an expression that did not belong on the traveler's face. Something in the glass shifted, a dark shape passing behind the reflection, like a figure walking in a hallway that did not exist in this room. The traveler turned. No one. Only empty furniture and a cold hearth. When they looked back to the mirror, the reflection had changed. Now the child, the very same child from the portrait upstairs, stood beside the reflection, their small hand resting on the reflection's arm. But there was no child in the room. Only in the glass, the reflection smiled. A thin, unnatural smile. The traveler did not feel. And then, very slowly, the reflection lifted its hand as if to knock from the other side of the mirror. The traveler stood frozen as the reflection's hand rose toward the glass. A single tap sounded, soft, hollow, as though coming from deep inside the mirror rather than its surface. Then another, and another. Each tap sending a faint ripple across the reflection's features, distorting the smile into something stretched and unnatural. The child's reflection did not move. They only stared wide-eyed, expression unreadable, hand still resting on the reflection's arm. But then, the mirror fogged over again, this time from the inside. The traveler watched in horror as breath marks appeared from behind the glass, each exhale slow and deliberate, as though something was leaning in closer to watch them. Finally, the fog thickened until the reflection was completely obscured. A long, low sigh drifted from the glass, a sound that did not belong in any mirror. The traveler backed away, heart pounding. The floor beneath them creaked as though someone else was stepping backward with them. When they reached the far wall and dared a final glance, the mirror stood still. The fog had faded. Their reflection was normal again. But the child was gone. The traveler slipped out of the parlor and back into the foyer, seeking any place that did not breathe or whisper or watch. But the change in the house was unmistakable now. The silence, once thick and heavy, had shifted. It now held a pulse, a rhythm, as though the house itself had begun to breathe. At the far end of the foyer stood an old grandfather clock. When the traveler entered the house earlier, the clock had been still, its pendulum unmoving, its face frozen, its hands rusted in place. Now the pendulum swung gently, smoothly, with no sound. The clock's hands began to turn, slowly at first, then with unnatural speed, spinning in a full circle over and over, as though time inside the house were looping in on itself. Just as suddenly, the hands stopped, snapping into place toward a single time. 3:03 a.m. A soft click echoed from within the clock. Then a second click. Then a third. In a slow, steady rhythm, like footsteps descending from inside the clock, even though the doors remained shut. Refusing to look deeper into the impossible clock, the traveler turned away and climbed the staircase toward the upper level. The faint tapping they had heard earlier now grew clearer, a steady beat coming from somewhere down the hall. The portraits lining the walls watched silently as the traveler passed, their eyes following with unnerving clarity. At the far end of the corridor was a door they had not noticed before. It was not one of the faded, aged doors that had belonged to the house for decades or centuries. This door was new, clean, white, almost glowing against the darkness around it. A soft sound came from within, a rhythmic rustle, like pages turning. The traveler reached for the handle. Cold metal met their skin, sending a shiver down their arm. When the door opened, the room beyond was startlingly plain. A table, a chair, a single lamp casting a pale circle of light, and on the table lay a book. A thick one, leather-bound, old, its pages turned on their own, fluttering gently as though an unseen reader were skimming them. When the pages stopped, a faint impression appeared across the open sheet, letters forming slowly, like ink rising from the paper instead of sinking into it. The traveler leaned closer to read the words etched upon the page. The page read, "The house remembers all who belong to it." Below that sentence was a list of names. Dozens at first, then hundreds. A catalog of individuals whose fates were tied to the house in some way. Some names were centuries old, some decades, some recent. The traveler turned the page, more names, and more, until finally they reached the last page. Only one name was written there, their own, not in ink, but carved into the page itself, as though the book had gouged it through the paper with invisible claws. A chill ran up the traveler's spine. As they reached out toward the carved letters, the lamp on the table flickered, casting long shadows across the room. From the hallway, just outside the door, the soft patter of bare feet began again. Slow, careful. Approaching the room, the traveler turned. The door closed itself. The footsteps stopped just outside, then silence. Suddenly, the lamp flickered again, once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the room into thick darkness. The traveler's breath quickened. They reached out blindly, hands brushing the table, the book, the chair. Then, a sound. The faintest creak of the new white door slowly opening. Cold air drifted into the room. Not the natural cold of night. This chill was different. Heavy, purposeful, like the presence of something that had been waiting in the dark for a long time. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, small, thin. A child, but not the child from the mirror. This one was different, their features obscured by shadow so deep it swallowed the light around them. The traveler could not see their face, only the faint outline of a small hand reaching forward as if to touch the air between them. The hand trembled, not with fear, but with longing. And from the darkness, the child whispered, a voice soft as sleep, fragile as dusk, "You shouldn't have left." The traveler stood motionless, frozen between fear and disbelief as the small trembling hand hovered in the darkness before them. The child's outline quivered, as though their entire form was barely holding together, flickering at the edges like a candle flame in a draftless room. The voice came again, soft, knowing. "You left us," it whispered. "You left me." The traveler took a single step back. The floor groaned underfoot, the sound stretching unnaturally long, as if echoing down a tunnel of hollow wood. The child lowered their hand. Their head tilted slightly, a movement too slow, too deliberate. When they spoke again, the voice was layered, more than one whisper speaking at the same time, overlapping like memories bleeding together. "The house followed you. Even when you forgot." The traveler shuddered. Forgot what? Forgot who? But before they could speak, before they could form a single word, the child stepped backward into the hall and vanished. Not into shadow, but into nothing. The traveler stumbled into the corridor, searching for any sign of the small figure. But the hallway was not the same hallway they had walked through before. The floorboards were darker, the wood swollen and warped, as if soaked in years of moisture that had never been allowed to dry. The portraits on the walls were no longer faded, nor merely watching. They followed. As the traveler passed, the eyes in the portraits tracked their every movement, some with sorrow, others with fury, and a few with hollow longing. One portrait in particular drew the traveler's gaze. A face they recognized, with chilling clarity. The same child who had just stood in the doorway. Younger, smiling faintly, alive. A family stood behind the child. A mother, a father, and one more figure whose face was scratched out, viciously, as though by fingernails. The traveler leaned closer. The scratched-out figure was about the same height they themselves had been as a child. The house groaned overhead, a long, low complaint that rattled dust from the beams. The traveler approached the staircase, the same one leading down to the foyer. But the foyer was gone. Where it should have been was only more hallway, stretching into impossible distance, walls bending subtly, like ribs in the chest of something that breathed. Behind the traveler, the door they had come through closed softly, not slammed, not clicked, just closed, as though guided by a gentle hand. The house no longer seemed indifferent. It watched, it waited, it remembered. A low hum traveled beneath the floorboards, vibrating upward into the traveler's bones. Not a sound exactly, more like a shared heartbeat. The house's heartbeat, the traveler's heartbeat, beating together in slow rhythm. At the end of the distorted hallway stood a door the traveler had not seen before. Heavy, dark, bound in rusted iron, the same style as the scratched door on the lower floor, but older, much older. A faint light flickered underneath it, a deep red glow that pulsed with the rhythm of the house's breathing. The traveler approached slowly, each step stirring whispers from the walls. Not words, just sounds, soft, trembling breaths, as though the house was struggling to contain something behind the door. When the traveler reached out and touched the handle, a jolt of cold shot up their arm, freezing them in place. The whispers stopped. Everything stopped. The house fell silent. Utterly, completely silent. Then, from the other side of the door, came a single knock, slow, deliberate, waiting to be answered. The traveler hesitated, hand hovering over the handle. Their breath fogged in the air, as the temperature around them dropped sharply. The walls seemed to lean inward, as though listening, as though eager to hear the traveler's response. Then came the voice, the same soft voice from before, the same layered whisper that felt too familiar. "You left me behind." The traveler's heart thumped painfully in their chest. Memories long buried, pressed against the edges of consciousness. Fragmented images, half-formed feelings, shadows of a childhood blurred by time. A room, a crying child, a door slamming shut. Running footsteps, darkness, a voice calling their name, asking not to be left alone. The traveler stumbled backward. The memories slipped away like water through fingers. But the pain in their chest remained. The voice spoke again, this time with unmistakable sorrow. "I waited for you." Then the knock came again, soft, desperate, hopeful. Unable to turn away, unable to move, the traveler reached for the handle. Their hand shook violently as their fingers closed around it, cold metal biting into their skin. They turned it. Slowly, the latch clicked, and the door opened inward with a long, trembling creak. A breath of warm air rushed out, carrying a scent the traveler had not smelled in years. Old books, dust, and something faintly sweet like childhood memories rotting slowly in the dark. A small shape stood inside the room, tiny, still. The child, not flickering now, not distorted, but solid, real. Their eyes lifted to meet the travelers, filled not with malice, but with longing, deep, aching longing. Tears glimmered along the child's cheeks as they whispered, "You were supposed to stay." The travelers stood at the threshold, their breath caught somewhere between their throat and the cold weight settling in their chest. The room beyond the iron-bound door did not belong to the house. It was small, quiet, lit by a single oil lamp that glowed with a fragile, breathing flame. Shelves lined the walls, but instead of books they held objects wrapped in cloth, each tied with thin twine. Some large, some no bigger than a coin, and each one was trembling. Just slightly, as though something inside moved in its sleep. The child stood among them, hands clasped behind their back like a nervous host presenting a room meant for someone else. The traveler stepped inside. The air grew warm and heavy with memory, too warm, as if the room was trying to soften them, to make them remember without fear. But fear came anyway. The child drifted toward the nearest shelf and rested a hand on one of the trembling bundles. It stilled at their touch, completely, obediently. The child looked up, their voice no louder than a breath. "These are yours." The traveler's skin prickled. A slow chill ran down the spine as the realization pressed in. The objects were memories, bound, hidden, stored away, like secrets too heavy to carry in the mind. The child lifted the bundle and placed it in the traveler's hands. It twitched. A faint crackling sound echoed inside it, like dry leaves breaking under unseen footsteps. The traveler swallowed hard. Their fingers trembled as they began to unwrap the cloth. The twine fell away. The final layer loosened. Inside lay a small wooden horse, its paint chipped, its legs uneven, its body scorched as though it had once been too close to flame. The traveler stared. A memory surfaced, faint but unmistakable, playing on a wooden floor. Laughing. A sibling's voice nearby. The horse in their hand. A clatter. A cry. A door closing. Someone left behind. Someone always left behind. The traveler's knees went weak. The child watched silently, their expression unreadable. Too old for their face. Too knowing for their years. After a long moment, the child whispered, "You took it with you when you ran." The traveler tried to speak, but their voice cracked under the weight of words that no longer felt like their own. The child stepped closer. The air rippled around them, a faint distortion like heat rising off stone. Their gaze sharpened. The softness behind their eyes faded a little, replaced by a quiet ache that bordered on accusation. "You said you'd come back." The traveler's breath faltered. Their hand tightened around the toy horse until the wood dug painfully into their palm. The child took another step. Their voice layered again, multiple tones weaving together like overlapping memories. "But you didn't." The room dimmed. Shadows thickened. The trembling bundles on the shelves stirred restlessly, as if awakened by the child's words. Some began to thump softly against the wood, their movements growing sharper, more frantic. The walls creaked. The lamp flickered. Something unseen shifted under the floorboards like a large body turning in its sleep. The house itself seemed to lean closer. As a memory pushed through the fog, crystal, clear, and devastating. A storm, a hurried escape. Two children running down the hall, one older, one younger. Voices shouting behind them, something breaking. The house shaking. A final promise. "I'll come back." Then, a door slamming shut, a lock sliding. A small child pounding fists against the other side. Screaming, begging, calling for their sibling, calling the traveler's name. The name the traveler had carried all their life without knowing why it felt like a weight. The traveler gasped. The room pulsed, the walls trembling with the memory. The child's eyes glistened. Not with anger, but with something worse. Hope, fragile and breaking. "I waited," they whispered again. Before the traveler could respond, the floor beneath them shuddered. The tremble moved from one end of the room to the other, slow, heavy, as though something huge was dragging itself awake beneath the boards. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The lamp dimmed to a thin, quivering thread of light. The trembling bundles on the shelves began to rattle violently, some falling to the floor, rolling like panicked creatures seeking escape. The child stiffened. Their eyes widened slightly, with fear, with recognition. They turned to the traveler and whispered urgently, "It heard you remember." The traveler's pulse hammered. The house groaned again, not from age but from hunger. Slowly, the sound of breathing rose from below, deep, ragged, awake. The traveler froze. The heavy, ragged breathing rose from beneath the floorboards, each inhale shuddering through the wooden planks as though the house itself were alive and stirring from a decades-long sleep. The child backed away slowly, their small feet making no sound against the trembling boards. They whispered, barely audible. It only wakes when someone remembers. Another breath, deeper, louder, so heavy. The oil lamp's flame bent sideways, as if caught in the draft of a creature inhaling. The shelves rattled. The wrapped memories thumped wildly, some bursting free from their cloth coverings and clattering across the floor. Small objects skittering like insects, trying desperately to escape the presence rising below. The traveler clutched the wooden horse, their knuckles white, their heart pounding, in terrified rhythm with the house's awakening. A long, low groan echoed through the beams, a voice too large and too old to belong to anything human. The child reached for the traveler's hand, their fingers trembling, their voice cracking with urgency. "We have to go." But the traveler didn't move. They stood rooted, not only by fear, but by the raw pull of memory unraveling inside them. The child tugged again, more desperately. "If it reaches us now, it won't let go." Another heaving breath rumbled below the floor, shifting dust and bending the lamp's flame. The boards under the traveler bowed slightly, as though something immense was pressing upward from the darkness beneath. The child whispered, voice breaking, "It woke up because it knows who you are." The words cut through the traveler like cold wind. They tore their gaze from the floor and looked at the child, the fear behind their eyes, the trembling in their shoulders. This fear wasn't for themselves. It was for the traveler. The house shuddered violently. A crack split across the floor, thin at first, then widening, boards groaning, nails screaming as they tore loose. From the fissure rose a hot, fetid gust of air, thick with the stench of earth and rot, and something older, a smell of forgotten time, of things buried too long in hungry soil. The lamp flickered wildly. The small bundles rolled across the floor toward the opening, pulled as if by invisible hands, drawn back to the darkness from which they had come. The child grabbed the traveler's arm with surprising strength. "You're remembering too fast," they whispered. "It can feel it." The walls warped inward, the shelves bending like ribs under pressure. Shadows spilled down from the corners, crawling across the ceiling like ink poured into water. The traveler stumbled back as a wooden beam snapped overhead and crashed to the floor, sending splinters across the room. The child pulled the traveler toward the only exit, the narrow doorway leading back into the long, distorted hallway. Behind them, the fissure widened again, a guttural rumble rising from its depths. Something moved down there, massive, slow, turning in the dark. The traveler risked one glance back. The floorboards rose and fell with each breath the unseen thing took, as if the entire house were nothing more than the thin shell above a sleeping beast. The child's voice cracked. "Don't look at it. Just run." The traveler followed, their legs moving before their mind could catch up. The air behind them seemed to suction inward, as though the crack was inhaling, drawing the warmth and the breath out of the room. The lamp extinguished with a sound like a gasp. They burst into the hallway. The door to the memory room slammed behind them, not from force, but as if pushed by an invisible hand trying to seal something in, or something out. The hallway had changed again. The walls were narrower, the ceiling lower, the air thick and heavy with whispers. Portraits hung crooked, their faces blurred as if smeared by hurried fingers. Footsteps echoed behind the traveler, not the child's, not their own, but something slow, massive, dragging itself closer. The house moaned, the floor trembling underfoot. The child looked back, their expression torn, between fear and guilt. It followed your memory. It always follows what was forgotten. The traveler felt a cold shiver run up their spine. The voices in the walls rose like a chorus, urgent, breathless, warning, and pleading all at once. They reached the end of the hall, only to find it blocked, the way forward sealed by a new wall that had not existed before. The child stopped abruptly. Their eyes widened, with something deeper than fear. Recognition, dread. They turned to the traveler and whispered softly, as though speaking too loudly might wake the house fully. "It wants you to remember your name." The traveler frowned. confused, but then their breath caught. Because suddenly the silence in the hallway felt like expectation, like waiting. The traveler opened their mouth to speak, to say their name, to say the name they had always known as their own. But when they tried, no sound came out. Only a cold whisper from somewhere behind them. Not that name. The traveler stared at the newly formed wall, its surface uneven, as though grown from the house itself instead of built by human hands. It pulsed faintly, a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat beneath layers of old paint. Behind the traveler, the dull, dragging footsteps continued through the hall, growing closer, growing heavier. The child moved beside them, small shoulders squared, fear shimmering in their eyes, but not ruling them, not yet. They whispered, voice trembling. It shaped the wall so you can't run anymore. Dust trickled from the ceiling as something enormous shifted beneath the floorboards, a low groan rolling through the house like a distant storm. The traveler tried again to speak their name. Nothing. Only silence and the faint echo of a forgotten syllable stirring at the edge of memory. The child stepped closer, raising a hand as though to touch the traveler's arm, but stopping just short, as if uncertain they still had the right. They spoke gently, carefully. The name you've been using. It isn't the first one you had. A tremor ran through the house. A warning. The traveler blinked, confused, but the confusion felt wrong, manufactured, as if something in the house had spent years, softening the edges of their memory. The child lowered their head. You had a name before you left me. The hallway fell colder, the air thickening until every breath felt like inhaling fog. Behind them, the dragging presence inched closer, its movements slow and deliberate, as though savoring the approach. All along the walls, the blurred portraits began to whisper. At first, the voices were faint, a soft collective murmur like wind slipping between autumn leaves. But then the words sharpened. Echoes of conversations, names called out, pleas unanswered, sobs swallowed by time. The traveler leaned in, their heart hammering. One portrait, a young woman whose face had long been smeared by some unseen hand, seemed to move, her lips parting ever so slightly. A breath escaped the painting, cold and fragile, and with it a barely audible whisper. Say who you were. The traveler stepped back. The portrait stirred again, more urgently. Say it. Remember. Before the door closed. Before you ran. The traveler pressed a hand against their temple, a flicker of memory snapping in and out of focus. A name. A small one. A name spoken by a child in the dark. Their throat tightened. The footsteps behind them stopped. The air thickened, dense as wet cloth. Something loomed in the darkness, a shape not yet visible, but felt like a shadow cast before its source arrives. Heat radiated from it, a suffocating heat that seeped into the walls and made the portrait sweat thin rivulets of paint. The child's expression hardened, not with anger, not with fear, but with resolve, a determination that made them seem older than their small body allowed. They stepped in front of the traveler, placing themselves between the presence and the one who once left. Softly they said, "It wants the name you forgot, the one that ties you here." The traveler felt a chill crawl down their spine. Ties you here. The words echoed like a tolling bell. The traveler squeezed their eyes shut. The hallway dimmed around them, the whispers fading into a dull hum as a deeper memory rose to the surface. A small room, rain hammering against the windows. Two children, one older, one younger, huddled together in the dark. The younger one crying softly. The older one, the traveler, holding their hand, whispering promises they were too young to keep. Then, the storm growing louder, the door shaking, voices shouting. A command to run. A final moment. The younger child, clinging to them, begging, "Don't leave me behind." Underscore. And in that moment, clear as the first breath after waking, the traveler heard their lost name. It echoed through their mind, through the hallway, through the trembling walls. A name they had not heard since the night they fled. The house screamed. Not a human scream, but a structural one. Boards bending, nails snapping, beams twisting, as though the entire structure were recoiling from the traveler's memory. The portraits writhed, faces distorting in agony as the whispers turned to wails. The child staggered backward, covering their ears. Their voice cracked. "It knows now. You remember." Heat erupted behind them, a wave of blistering air rolling down the hallway as the unseen presence took a long, furious breath. The floorboards beneath the traveler bulged upward, as though something beneath had struck them with immense force. The traveler felt the name linger at the front of their mind, heavy, sharp, terrifying. But real, more real than anything they had spoken in years. The child looked up, their eyes wide in awe and fear. "Say it," they whispered. "Say your name before it reaches us." The traveler stood trembling, the child beside them, the hallway buckling as the house hissed and groaned under the weight of awakening memory. The true name, the forgotten one, pounded inside the traveler's mind, each repetition growing louder, more insistent, like a heartbeat that had been silent for far too long. The presence behind them dragged itself closer, its movements impossibly slow, yet unbearably heavy, as though it carried centuries in every breath. The floor dipped under its weight. The air shimmered with heat. Shadows curled around the corners like living things fleeing from it. The child lifted their hand, reaching for the traveler's sleeve, their voice cracking. "Once you speak it, the house can't lie to you anymore." A violent shudder ran through the walls, as if the very structure rejected those words. Loose plaster rained down. Picture frames burst open. The whispering portraits went silent all at once, their painted eyes wide with something like dread. The travelers swallowed hard and took one trembling breath. The presence behind them exhaled again, a furious blistering gust that rattled the floorboards and sent the hallway lights into spasms of flickering. The child's voice rose, urgent and breaking. "Say it now." The traveler opened their mouth. The forgotten name, their first name, slid from memory into language. A small sound at first, barely audible. But the hallway felt it. The house felt it. The presence behind them froze in place, as though stunned. The traveler said it again. Stronger this time, uncertain, but real. The old name rippled through the hallway like a shockwave. The walls buckled outward. The boarded-up windows groaned as light, pale and trembling, tried to seep through their cracks. The portraits screamed. A chorus of distorted wails as paint peeled back to reveal faces underneath. Faces the traveler almost recognized. The unseen presence behind them roared. A sound so vast, the world seemed to tilt around it. But the name hung in the air, glowing in the silence, between beats of the heart. The child stared up at the traveler, eyes wide with recognition, and whispered, "I knew you'd remember." As the true name echoed, the hallway began to warp. Not violently, but slowly. As if reality itself was remembering how it was supposed to be. The walls stretched, straightening. The ceiling rose. The color of the wallpaper shifted from decayed gray to something paler, something that once held warmth before time rotted it away. The air lightened, just slightly, enough for the traveler to draw a full breath without choking. But the change was not entirely gentle. The floor beneath the traveler shuddered again as the presence behind them pulled itself forward, determined, enraged. The traveler turned instinctively, but the child pressed a hand against their arm, shaking their head. "Don't look at it," they whispered. "Not yet." The command carried a weight the traveler didn't understand, but obeyed. The child stepped a few paces forward, placing themselves between the traveler and the thing in the dark. Their small frame seemed too fragile to stand against such a presence, and yet something in their posture changed. Their shoulders straightened. Their voice steadied. Their shadow lengthened across the trembling floor. For the first time, the traveler saw the child not as a flickering anomaly nor a ghost of memory, but as something else entirely. Someone who had been waiting, someone who had endured. someone who had never left. They turned to the traveler, eyes shimmering not with fear, but with sorrow. "You were my older sibling," they said softly. "I wasn't supposed to survive alone." The traveler's breath hitched. The truth settled over them like cold rain. The forgotten name was not only theirs, it connected them, bound them, tied them to a past they had tried to outrun. Behind them, the dragging footsteps ceased. The presence lurched to a halt as if the spoken name had pinned it in place. A low growl resonated through the floorboards, shaking dust loose. From the beams overhead, the child flinched but stayed standing, stayed between. The traveler felt a cold dread rise slowly through their chest. The presence wasn't reacting to anger. It was reacting to recognition. The traveler whispered, their voice barely audible. "It knows me?" The child nodded once, slowly. It always did. The hallway trembled again, the sound of the presence shifting its weight, preparing to move once more. The child grabbed the traveler's hand tightly, their voice a tense whisper. "Saying your name wasn't enough. You remembered who you were. But now, you have to remember what the house wants from you." The door swung open fully, and what lay beyond was not a room born of wood and wallpaper, but a memory made solid. Dim light spilled in from no visible source. Floating dust moved as if stirred by a slow, ancient breath. The traveler stepped inside, the child's hand still clutched in theirs, though the child's fingers felt lighter now, less tangible, as though crossing this threshold had cost them something. The room stretched out like a hollowed-out memory, their old bedroom, the layout unchanged, but stripped of color, drained of warmth, as though someone had copied it from a fading mind. A small bed stood in the corner, blankets undisturbed. Two toys lay side by side, a mismatched pair the siblings had once fought over. And on the wall, drawn in crayon, were childish scribbles, a sun, a crooked house, two stick figures holding hands. The child stared at the drawings, silence settling over them like dust. "You always held my hand when we got scared," they whispered. The traveler felt a sharp ache in their chest. They remembered those nights, but vaguely, like shadows cast by a candle almost burned out. Chapter 55. The night everything changed, the room darkened suddenly, as though a cloud had passed over an unseen moon. The traveler's breath hitched as an old memory rose up inside them, not gently, but violently, as if the house itself shoved it to the surface. A night. A scream, the walls bending inward. The siblings huddled on the bed as the house throbbed with a heartbeat not their own. The traveler saw themselves, younger, terrified, pulling the child by the hand, running toward the hallway. The door at their back slamming shut as the child tripped, crying out. And the traveler, frozen by fear, by instinct, ran through the hallway, through the front door that swung open as if welcoming escape, leaving the child behind. The memory collapsed in a shudder of guilt, so sharp it nearly dropped the traveler to their knees. The child's voice trembled. "I yelled your name," the traveler whispered, barely audible. "I didn't look back." Chapter 56. The child's fate. The room shifted again. A shape formed in the corner, a silhouette small and crumpled on the bedroom floor. The traveler felt bile rise. The child didn't move toward the shape. They simply whispered, "The house didn't kill me. It kept me." The traveler's voice cracked. "Why?" The child looked up, eyes filled with a sadness, older than the house itself. "Because it thought you would come back for me." A long silence. "And because I believed you would, too." The traveler's throat tightened. The presence in the hallway growled deeply, a reminder that it still waited, that it still watched. The child stepped closer, flickering faintly, their form thinning like mist. "It became what it is because of us." The traveler shook their head, tears stinging. "No, because of me." But the child corrected softly, "Because it learned fear from both of us." Chapter 57. The house's true face. The room cracked, literally split open as a massive tremor shook the walls. The presence in the hallway moved again, closer this time, its weight bending the floorboards. The child turned sharply, fear finally breaking through their fragile calm. "It's coming in." The traveler grabbed the child, pulling them backward. But the doorway behind them was no longer a doorway. It was a mouth. A maw of darkness, pulsing with a low, hungry rumble. The house was closing them in, caging them with memory and guilt and something ancient that had grown too attached. The child pressed a hand to the traveler's chest. "Listen to me. You didn't abandon me. You were a child too." The presence outside growled again, a sound like metal dragging on bone. The room dimmed. Walls bent inward. And then the child whispered, "It's time to face it." The travelers swallowed hard, their heart pounding with dread. "Face what?" The child pointed toward the doorway, toward whatever waited beyond it. "The thing the house became because of us." The traveler took one last breath, feeling the weight of every memory the house had forced upon them. They stepped toward the door, the child beside them, their fading presence still warm enough to guide. The house resisted. The floor rippled like water, the walls shuddered as if trying to push them back. But the traveler pressed forward. The door dissolved into shadow, and the presence finally came into view. It stood impossibly tall, its form shifting as though made of fractured darkness and broken reflections. A long, sloping head. Limbs too thin and too many. The traveler realized with a sick twist of recognition. It was shaped not like a monster, but like a fear. A fear the siblings once imagined. A creature born from the nights they hid together, whispering about the shadow thing that watched from the hallway. And now it was real, because the house had learned it from them. Its voice, if it could be called that, slithered through the air like wind through dead leaves. "You came back." The traveler felt no bravery, only the weight of a childhood lived in terror and a lifetime lived in denial. But they stepped forward anyway. The creature loomed overhead, its many eyes studying the traveler with a strange, mournful intelligence, as if it expected them to run again. The traveler whispered, voice shaking, "I'm not leaving this time." The child, now nearly transparent, stood beside them, watching quietly. The creature recoiled slightly, its form flickering, shuddering. The house groaned. Something cracked. A tremor rolled through the floor like a dying heartbeat. The traveler reached out, their hand trembling, and touched the creature's arm. It froze, flickered, then broke apart into drifting shadows that dissolved into dust before they hit the floor. The house let out a long, slow exhale, a sound not of anger but of release. The traveler turned to the child, but they were fading fast, glowing softly like a candle burning down. They smiled, a small, grateful smile that softened every shadow. "You saved me." The travelers shook their head, tears falling. "I should have saved you then." The child's voice was a faint whisper now. "You did. It just took you longer to come back." The room brightened, colors returning, the house unraveling its long-held grief. The child looked at the traveler one last time. "Go, live your life. Both of us finally can." And with that, the child dissolved into warm, drifting light, a final sigh in a house that no longer had power to hold them. The traveler walked down the now empty hallway, past silent rooms, past walls that no longer watched. The front door stood open, really open, not a lure, not a trap, but an exit. Morning light spilled across the floor for the first time in years. The traveler stepped through, feeling the weight of the house fall away in a warm rush of air. Behind them, the house at the edge of sleep creaked once, a peaceful, settling sigh, and then grew still. The traveler did not look back. Some stories are not meant to be revisited. Some houses are meant to be left behind.